You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back once again to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from Ivoxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt VDI. Nowadays, there's a V in front of everything, Yeti, and alongside me is my co-host, Matt Vacazolino.
Ha 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 ha.
And each episode, we dive into the wide range of technologies that make up this beautiful sandbox called IT that we all play in. We share our hopes and dreams, opinions both positive and critical alike, all with a touch of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all need a seat on that couch, yes. So a couple of things to get to before we dive in. We do have hands-on vSphere 6.7 Advanced, a brand new class coming in the back end of September 22nd through 24th, so a little more than a month and a half away. It's led by our consultant, Shane. He's been a VMware expert since 2001, and he's actively been consulting on it for over a decade. It's a fully virtual class. No worries about social distancing, no mask policy unless you want to wear a mask from your webcam. You're welcome, but we don't care either way. And they're coming, again, like I said, September 22nd through the 24th. Now, slots are filling up quickly, but we have a very special deal for Data Center Therapy listeners. Listen to this. You put a special code in when you're registering, and it's going to knock off $1,000. Yeah, I mean,
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Not bad, right?
I like discount codes.
I listen to podcasts. I listen to where they have advertisements, and they say, go to this website and put a promo code, like for, I don't know, one of the VPN things for your phone or whatever. And it's not $1,000, I'll tell you that.
No.
So, pretty good deal. Anyway, check out the show notes to learn more. We'll talk about the link at the end as well. But again, the special code for you, don't forget that, is DCT, as in Data Center Therapy 1000. Special code is DCT 1000. Now that we've spilled the beans, you must listen to the episode, or we will find out that you cut out early from class and take the refund. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway. Okay. Special guest today, Mr. David Crow. You might remember him from such episodes as Working From Home and our Red Hot HCI Throwdown. Cantankerous as always, Mr. Crow, how are you?
Wait, are you saying the episode was cantankerous, or that I'm always cantankerous? Which
I'm going to let that float out there.
Okay, sort of exists.
Let the audience decide, right? Yeah. Like one of those Sopranos episodes.
There you go. Perfect. How are you guys this morning?
Having our coffee. It's good.
Yeah. How are you? It's been a little bit. The work from home thing, we talked about that, and it was after all of the COVID mania, so it hasn't been that long, although our cadence has been, it's probably been, 10 or 15 episodes since we last chatted with you.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, invest a lot of money in, like, standing pads and squishier shoes to wear in my concrete bunker that is my basement, and a standing desk and things like that. A webcam that actually works. Just the little things have been making a big difference in keeping.
How do you like the standing desk?
Oh, dude, it is amazing. Yeah, it is. It's the best money I've ever spent on a piece of furniture. I mean, I loved my desk before. I had this super stable, really deep. It worked really well for me. But this thing is really nice, and it's not just that this specific desk is nice. Just being able to stand up and walk around a little bit.
It fixes a whole bunch of ergonomics and stuff, doesn't it?
It does. It solves a lot of problems for me. And just
I'm right there with you on that one.
I'm more.
Would you have thought that it wouldn't have made a big deal, or were you a skeptic to begin with, like, oh, maybe, and then you tried it?
I was actually pretty sold, because I went and worked at one of our customers, one of Ivoxy's customers, and they had standing desks there, and I spent about a month there helping them with a VDI project, and realized, like, okay, this is awesome. And I'd wanted,
pretty cool.
I'd wanted one ever since, but it was just a matter of, that's a lot of money to spend. I'm not spending a whole bunch of time sitting down at my computer, because we do a lot of on-site work. But
right.
But yeah, once this thing hit, that was like the first thing I did was, I was getting recommendations on Ivoxy's Slack about, here's the one you can get. So I was like, okay, someone else has actually bought this and it didn't fall over in a blaze of glory. Great, I'm buying this right away.
Yep.
Are you standing right now?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you are too, Matt.
Yep.
I feel left out somehow.
You could stand up also. You've got your what? You got your mic on the arm. Just stand up.
Do you want me to move my webcam too, or just keep it where it is?
Please move the webcam.
At least you got a shirt on, so hey. You wearing pants today?
Well, hey, I guess maybe you'll find out. Well, so on to our topic now that our readers, now listeners are definitely dropped off now if they weren't after the code.
Cricket.
But our main topic today is pretty exciting. One of our main pillars of our consultancy really is virtual desktop and remote work, and everything wrapped around that, especially when it comes to the VMware portion of that, which is Horizon. And we've been talking about Horizon 7 and its various iterations and versions and upgrades for, it feels like, a very long time. And just yesterday, Horizon 8 was released from NDA. So, our own intrepid Mr. Crow has been doing an awful lot of work and research and demoing and labbing and testing, sifting through the release notes. And he's here to chat with us about what really is new and why I should care about Horizon 8.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. I kind of went in a little bit skeptical because, as we all know, we've spent a lot of time with Horizon 7. And at a certain point, you felt like an 8 was inevitable, if for no other reason, to not have like 7.23, because that feels really stupid.
But you also start to cringe, like, oh no, a major version number before the period. What are they going to? Because
what's going to change?
What can I break today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not all of us, thankfully, but a good number of us survived the psychic wars that were App Volumes 3.0, and so yeah, sometimes getting that shiny new 0.0 on the end of something is not all that it's cracked up to be. 8 looks pretty interesting though. They're bringing some changes, but they're not massive changes. But there's some things that, especially, we're going to get to probably towards the end. So this is the teaser. You folks who are running Horizon Standard, stick around, because there's going to be some features that you've probably been ogling for the last few years that may be trickling down into your licensing level.
That's cool.
Now, if we can only remember to do the callback.
Right.
That'll be the problem. At least semi-professionals.
Standard licensing, right?
Yeah. Sear it into your brain.
So, in terms of Horizon 7, were there pain points? And I'm kind of working backwards here, right? Because we know what is new and we're going to talk about it. But are there current pain points of 7 where they were ripe for improvement that 8 kind of delivers on?
The biggest issues that I experienced with 7 were cloud pod architecture was a really great idea that made a lot of sense. But it required a lot of bring your own, roll your own load balancing, be an expert with F5 or something else similar, but F5 was certainly an industry leader in this. But it required a lot of expertise from your IT department or bringing in a consultancy and spending a lot of time to understand all this geolocation, because we had limitations with Cloud Pod where if that user got to the wrong pod first, they were essentially hosed. And then it was just a matter of how badly at that point. There wasn't a way to kind of
telling a nightmare where East Coast user gets signed to West Coast and then accesses a resource back on the East Coast, and they're doing round trip.
Yeah, it's going to look at that user's home site, and then it's going to send him to his home site. If it can, and most of these things are plumbed so that they can, and then you're adding latency, where you need to intercept that is when that East Coast user first goes to connect. It needs to know this is an East Coast guy. I send him to my East Coast pod. It's not impossible, but you got to make sure that piece is there, and a lot of our customers don't have F5 with GTM and all this good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Was there a functionality when you say Cloud Pod? Was there a bit where you would build VDI on like Amazon native or Azure native without leveraging something like VM Cloud on AWS?
There were, especially Azure. Horizon desktops on Azure. You couldn't do anything that's cloud native. You couldn't do Cloud Pod with, from my memory. Maybe there's an exception lurking out there, but from my memory, there was no way to do cloud native and do the Cloud Pod to get those global entitlements and home sites and have some of this control that we really, really liked in this standardization that we liked with Cloud Pod. You kind of got left out in the cold if you did something like Azure. where you did VMC on AWS. Well, hey, that's just VMware dropping a VMware stack into Amazon's data center, and you're totally fine. Now you can do it exactly like it's just another location. The difference between that and a colo is simply maybe the cost model, logistics, things like that.
There does seem to be two types of cloud. Are you talking about things you can do on the cloud providers, and then you've got cloud native services that they also provide, and it's two different consumption models. It's almost like there's colo and run your VMs on this cost scale. Oh my gosh, what does that cost here? And then there's consume our cloud services, Lambda, SQL, Azure, Cloud SQL, and all of that.
That service kind of locks you into that provider then, right? Because that
100%. Unless you, and we've talked about it before, like Cloud Foundry, and I'll admit to it not staying up on this completely, but there are languages you can write to. You write your apps to, that then on the back end, they have hooks into the various cloud providers, and you stay up to date there. So if you needed to pull up stakes and move over next door, should something bad happen to one of the other major guys, you're not stuck with refactoring your entire app. But you've already done it once to refactor to that third party. Theoretically, Cloud Foundry could
trade-offs everywhere,
too,
right?
So,
Yeah, there's always risk. You're always hitching your horse. You're always hitching your horse to somebody's wagon, right? And it's just a question of who and how much do you trust them. But one of the big pushes that we're seeing with Horizon 8 is VMware trying to get that full VMware stack available in more different cloud providers. So Azure's coming later this year. Google's already there. Dell EMC, of course, you're going to be running on a VX rail there. And when you
there is VMC on Azure, but you're saying the VDI portion of that does not support VMC on Azure yet.
Well, it's not. It's well, that's a good question because they're calling it something else for VDI, and they say there's going to be day zero support, but it's also quote unquote later this year. So whether that's something slightly different, because in the past, like I said, with Horizon on Azure, we always had to do. It's completely different management tools. Management plane is completely different process for building and pushing an image and all that stuff. It's two completely separate environments with a similar skill set but different knowledge to administer. So VMware's trying to get rid of that.
Would you expect to see it like desktop as a service, or like here's your VM stack then? Here's your VM stack and it happens to run VDI.
Here's your VM stack and it happens to run VDI.
Colo.
Yep, It's going to look like a colo. And when you do that, and by do that, I should be clear here, when you have the VM stack in multiple locations and you're doing Cloud Pod and kind of stitching them together, you get with Horizon subscription licensing, which is the new licensing version they're pushing for. We're going to try to stay not get too into the weeds on licensing this morning. It's early, but Horizon Control Plane is kind of VMware's overarching sign into this dashboard and see what's going on in New York and LA and in London with all of your different pods. Who's using what? Are there any red flags? What do the alerts look like? Latencies, all that kind of stuff. That common control plane is what they're trying to get you to.
And that's different than what they're doing now, right? Because that's on VROPS. VROPS is doing that monitoring for you now, right?
Well, VROPS is only going to be looking at a single pod. VROPS is very detailed in a single site.
Okay.
Where this Horizon Control Plane is really for enterprises that have multiple pods. Let's take a look across pods and see if there's any issues between them, essentially, and just see what my consumption is. Am I underutilized in London compared to what I'm throwing at it? Oh, interesting. It's not super detailed, and we'll talk later about the future of VROPS, but that's going to be a little bit interesting as well.
So it's one thing to think that a cloud model scale of consuming a virtual desktop wouldn't that be neat to be able to not worry about my infrastructure and say, I want a Windows 10 desktop, give it to me now, boom, done. But I think, David, one of the reasons you're so busy, you and Ryan are so busy with the virtual desktop practice is setting up the infrastructure for VDI is very much the easy part.
Yes.
Right? And it's building your images, it's maintaining compatibility, it's quirkiness with that release of Windows, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe the infrastructure is not the problem. It's you have a desktop. What do you want to do with it? Oh, you want to install apps? Well, wait. et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, pushing up a standard image and getting a desktop as a service it was a really cool idea. And for certain really small, like ma and pa shops where they just wanted, I get desktop A, you get desktop B, we're going to
You've got
install
some
the
Excel.
software we need. Yeah, exactly. We need the
Connect
Office
to Drive or something. Yeah.
suite.
That's more like a terminal services thing and less of a actual true VDI Horizon environment.
It is. It's certainly not what VMware's pushing for. I hate to say the another V word so early, but that's the vision from VMware, right? Is that you get this sort of the ability to do a just-in-time desktop with a customized user experience and customized applications based on their job role, and that's what they're looking to be able to do. And desktop as a service, it was challenging to get there.
Well, that's kind of the thing we've seen with some of our customers is that it's having that desktop next to the application, next to the database, next to the big app that it's got to talk to and interact with, so you get that low latency, and all you have to do is worry about presentation over the wire to wherever that end user is, right? That's the one of the big selling points, right?
Absolutely. A great use case for doing VMC on AWS, just to pick one, the one that's kind of been around, the longest for being able to do a real cloud pod architecture, is if you set up cloud pod between an on-prem site and VMC on AWS, the model that makes the most sense on the server side of things is going to be, I run my primary workloads in my on-prem data center. Well, then I run primary Horizon in my on-prem data center. And if something horrible, God forbid, happens, then we fail over to AWS, and I all of a sudden go from 3 hosts all the way up to 10 hosts to run my Horizon infrastructure, and I do it, really quickly. So same thing with the servers, right? We burst that up, we put all that in the cloud, and everything is still close together because we picked all the same geographies from Amazon, and we've done all our due diligence in our cloud planning. That's the best use case for me, because when when Horizon's DR plan follows the rest of the business's DR plan, everything kind of works in concert much better than if, I'm the Horizon guy and I've got this plan to fail over to AWS, and you're the server guy and you're using Zerto to get down to a different data center somewhere else. And it's like, well, okay, now we're 50 milliseconds of latency apart from your desktop and your apps. So you have
How's
to be
that
careful.
feel on a desktop?
Yeah, not great. I think we can all imagine. Especially with lots of RPC calls or SQL or
SQL.
So we've talked about a lot of the cloud part of it. What else is really a headlining feature? Instant clones is something that you've got down here. I'd like to hear you talk more about. And if you wouldn't mind refreshing me a little bit regarding instant clones, linked clones, kind of just high level virtual whiteboard about what's the difference and why do I care, and why instant clones developments in this version are such a big deal.
Yeah. So the short, I'll try to give you the very short version. I think any customer that I've talked to is like, oh no, 20 minutes incoming. But guys, I'm going to try not to this time. For real.
Well, that's what I was trying to set up right away. I'm putting that out.
Yeah, Yeti will stop me.
Cliff Notes version.
So the linked clone is very much, let's be efficient on storage. And the instant clone is very much, let's be efficient on storage and RAM. There are other differences that make the make the instant clone more scalable faster, and that's great. But for most customers, that's not a huge consideration. Most customers aren't bursting from 2,000 up to 10,000 VMs and then back down to 2,000 in the matter of a workday. Most of my customers are just not in that position. So really, you're talking about linked clones have really good storage savings. They're very storage efficient, regardless of how dumb the storage that you throw at it is, which was huge back in the day when they came out. Because not everybody was running awesome storage arrays with dedupe and compression. But then instant clones come along, and the promise is, hey guys, because we have this parent VM that sits here and churns, and all the RAM is reserved and all that good stuff, we're going to share RAM. You'll notice there's no option on the instant clone to turn off transparent page sharing. It's just on, because that's part of how the instant clone's anatomy works, and what makes it great is that you get that increased RAM efficiency. But the problem that comes in with instant clones is as soon as you start doing multiple base images, as soon as your use case gets into, I need 5 or 6 different base images because I couldn't actually use app volumes for everything that I thought I could, or maybe the admin overhead was too great, whatever your reason is, as the customer, the more instant clones you end up using inside the same cluster, the less efficient your cluster gets. All of a sudden, you're using a third to a half of the RAM on all of your hosts. regardless of how many clones you've pumped out. And pumping out clones is only going to
get
increase.
Started bump is significant when it comes to an image.
Does that imply that you've effectively deployed every time you've got a new VM that gets vMotioned or a new desktop that gets vMotioned onto a new host? It ends up being the core of where that page sharing, that memory gets used?
There is a parent VM that's built on every single host in the cluster, and it's fully reserved. And so if I've got 10 different base images running, which some of my customers do, you know who you are, and none of you are happy about it, I guarantee it. But, it happens. It's real life. So sometimes you have 10 different base images, and if you have 12 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM or something like that, multiply that by 10 fully consumed, fully active RAM on these virtual machines, and that's before you even get started with users. So for a lot of my customers that buy into the promise of, hey, these are more RAM efficient, that introduces a real problem, because you're building your CPU to RAM ratio based on the idea that you're going to top out CPU first now, and sometimes rubber hits the road.
That's a different model to think about. Wow,
it is.
Yeah, that's totally different. That's not a VMware thing anymore.
It's
not a
I
thing
have
we've had to
customers
worry
ask me
about
all the
with
time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time, customers ask, "Oh, CPU, what clock speed should I?" Most people have a core density because that directly translates to VM density.
Yeah,
but clock speed doesn't. And we're well past the days of reading the back of the box that says requires a 2.4 gigahertz processor or above. That means nothing. And so really, I've got my feels. What my answer to that is, I try to find you the processor that's the good value for, where you get the fastest clock speed with the core density that you need before the hockey stick turn go for all the but other than that, I don't really have a great rule of thumb outside of that for clock speed. So, but does it affect desktops a lot? I would assume it makes a difference.
It absolutely does, but this is where the answer gets sticky. Is it also depends on the application. If you're running a lot of...
Oh, you mean it depends? In IT, it depends?
I'm sorry. I hate to do that to you.
I'm just going to have a custom keyboard made and just have an "it depends" button that just fills that out, because I'm just tired of typing.
Right.
Yeah. So like a CAD application that's not going to utilize a bunch of cores very well, obviously having a higher clock speed in your VDI cluster, that's really going to matter. Where there's certain applications where it doesn't matter as much, but you have to think about these single-threaded applications, and they get fewer and fewer as the years go by, and Windows gets better at using more threads. But the bottom line is that when you ask an application to do something, a lot of the time it's going to grab one core, and it's going to try to do it as fast as it can on that one core. And if that thing will burst up to 2.2, that's significantly slower than something running at 3.0.
Yeah.
Right?
You seen any customers running into the VMware vCPU license newly introduced limit? I would say you'd see that in a VDI environment, pure VDI, more than a traditional server environment.
It hasn't reared its head yet for me, but...
What is that, 28 that we're at?
Sounds
28
right.
cores, I think?
Something like that. It was in the 20s. And that's still new,
That's a single CPU limitation too, right? Or not?
I thought it was like total for the environment. So you've got a box with X number of cores, right?
Yeah, but I think usually you'd have to license each CPU. So you buy, for a dual socket CPU, you'd buy 2 VMware licenses and away you go. I think if you had a box with 2 32 core CPUs or above 28, you'd have to buy 4 to account for 28 plus 4 for each CPU.
Okay.
Yeah, most of my customers fall into the either high teens or low 20s. I haven't seen somebody run into a core count that's too nutty, because
you're getting there.
We will. Oh, we will get there, and VMware's seen the writing on the wall, and I think they're trying to continue to get their pound of flesh, right?
I can't believe that I would say I don't strongly disagree with that approach from them. I mean, if you were to be able to get your entire entire environment on a single server, they would go under overnight.
You're licensing.
They're still providing that density, that ability to do that.
Yeah, you're licensing by the server, and the servers are getting more and more dense. You're losing money on your licensing. It's
or they'll just change to a core license eventually. That might be the move too.
Yeah. Oh boy.
But there's that dance between the CPU manufacturers that support it and let them worry about it, right?
Yeah.
But somehow it doesn't feel like we win either way.
Never. They always want their dollars, right? Yeah.
It's funny how that works. But anyway, so back to instant clones. We have this problem with instant clones when we get too many versions, too many base images, too many iterations running in the environment at once. They stop being as efficient as we were promised. And also, we run into a lot of group policy complications with running parent VMs, sitting there getting group policies from the OU they're in, and then, we want to build another pool off of this, but we want to drop it in a different OU. Prepare yourself for a group policy nightmare. So sometimes I have customers who end up building specifically because they want to do test dev prod. They're a lot of times going to have the same image in test dev prod, but they want them in different OUs because they're testing a group policy change.
That's the point of
often.
testing and deving, is not messing with your production GPOs.
Yeah, in any way. So a lot of those customers end up running 3 copies just as rote. And then if they've got more than one version out in the wild, which if you're using test dev prod, you're trying very, very hard to avoid having 2 versions out in the wild. But if you did, all of a sudden you're up to 6. It's brutal. So the no parent VM is new in Horizon 8. So it's called Instant Clone Smart Provisioning. And it's the idea that we're going to get rid of this running parent VM and get back to what we had with linked clones, which was a single replica to condense that disk. Now, here's the thing. I don't know what the magic is on the back end that makes this thing still be able to do VM fork operations, but not need a running VM.
What's it forking?
Yeah. I have no idea.
What's the fork?
But they are. It's a forkless fork. But they are still.
Is that a spoon?
It's a spork.
You beat me to it. I was taking a sip of my coffee and I was ready to nail that, and you got it right from under me. Well played.
A spork operation.
A spork operation. VM spork. But they're still promising these very, very, very low clone times that we're used to seeing with instant clones. So again, it has yet to be seen for me. We want to get the bits in the lab and definitely play around with it and see how it feels. And it's got to be reliable, right? Now we're talking about Horizon 8. We're dropping this new way to clone things into Horizon 8. Hopefully it's reliable, because we all remember the early days of instant clones. There were some challenges in specific versions and patches, and you had to be really careful. I have customers who have gone on them, then gone off them. They've gotten a lot better, but I'm not thrilled about I'm thrilled about the prospect of it in 2 years when everything is like ironed out. I just hope this isn't a big enough change that it needs that much ironing, because it's really exciting for customers.
So this means you can configure and publish and make available as many images as you want without penalty until at least one user fires up. So if I have 6 images, like you said, in the old instant clone days, those are 6 parent VMs that are running, reserving resources, and theoretically the cost of entry is very high on each one of those, and they add up. In this model, you can have those 6 images that are published and available, but until one user logs into each one of them, we're not really consuming. There's no overhead until that first user comes in.
Well, and my understanding too is that these are without parents, so I wouldn't even expect the overhead that you get hit with to be exactly the same, like that full reserve of all the RAM. It could be. Again, we'd have to kick the tires on it to see for sure, and expect some updates. I definitely want to come back on once we've gotten more of a chance to play with Horizon 8. We're right on
know that, because it feels like that first user would not be the parent, but take the resource footprint place of the parent. Maybe not.
Yeah, you feel like there should be something there, but at the same time, that would certainly slow down that first one showing up. But building the parent VM takes time. So when we're talking about just in time, and that's the promise, it's parentless and just in time. And that idea doesn't satisfy both of those requirements. So I think we've just got to kick it around a little bit and see what it does. It's going to be interesting to see.
We just found a cheaper, better, faster, all 3 thing, it sounds like.
If what they're telling me is true, then that's absolutely the case, which is why I'm skeptical. But maybe the Spork is the best. It's like the ultimate hobo tool. Like, it works for everything.
Ask David about VM Spork next time you see him, and he'll give you an update.
Yeah,
that should be our code on the next giveaway.
VM Spork 1000.
VM Spork.
Write it down. Well, marketing, get on it.
You added a couple of other things in here, David. One of them being Linux published apps, and one of those things that I don't know how much of it's going on out there, but it's forever the year of Linux on a desktop, right? And I think we finally got past that repeated promise. However, it still kicks around and hangs around. You see things like this drop. What is Linux published app? Because I'm curious. I am genuinely curious.
It's terminal server functionality while avoiding the Microsoft, TS cals and data
that'd be
center
nice.
editions of Windows. And yeah, it looks, it looks interesting. If you have applications that will run on Linux, you can now don't be confused. It's Linux published apps, and I know that in the advanced level of licensing, you get published apps for Windows. The Linux ones today aren't coming in until Enterprise, so pay attention to that. So that being said, though, being able to drop Linux-based applications maybe to your if you have a bigger Mac OS shop or something like that, and they want to be able to consume these applications, you can take these.
So Firefox,
and that's just the application, not the full-on desktop. It's
not the full desktop. Yeah.
VMware
Then they've had Linux
experience.
desktops. Yeah, they've had Linux desktops for a while, but this is specifically that terminal services style. Just see the window, and I got to be honest. I am pretty interested in this, especially as we go to spin up the Ivoxy lab, and we're not made of Microsoft licensing dollars. It's like the idea of being able to avoid some of this stuff for
not
us.
cheap. Wow.
No. Pretty interesting. So we're definitely going to be playing around with this a lot and keeping folks updated, but I'm pretty excited about that one too.
All right. Okay, so that's some of what's new. I see some stuff in it. I'm just trying for the target of brevity, just kind of ripping through a little bit here. We obviously could go for hours if you let us. I see REST APIs, which is cool when it comes to things like we've been talking about automation an awful lot. Ansible, I'm sure. Anything that can tie into an API, or especially a REST API that's out there, means anything else can talk to it. Pretty cool when it comes to when you think about provisioning, cloud scale, and just your software-defined data center, right? And aforementioned. Cool stuff there. What's being ripped out of what are we losing now? Because there's always the what's put to pasture.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to run through, for the sake of time, I'm going to run through the list really, really quickly, and then you guys can pick apart the things that you think are interesting. So what's getting pulled out of the licensing packaging? vSAN used to be available for advanced and enterprise. Now it's going away. VMware's rationale.
Like included.
Yeah, it used to be included in the suite. Hey, here's storage to run it on. Now you have to go get it a la carte, or maybe you've got a Dell VX Rail. Maybe you've got VMC on AWS that's going to come with it. There's a lot of other, and this is their rationale, is there's a lot of other VMware licensing suites that are going to come with vSAN. So, maybe there's another way that
probably
you
trying to simplify it.
So, vSAN's going away. Here's a big one. VROPS for Horizon will have no support for Horizon 8. So if you upgrade right away to Horizon 8, which again, give it a few months, folks. Don't be nuts. Let's wait for some patching. Please don't call me. The VROPS for Horizon is going to have no support on Horizon 8, according to what I've heard from VMware. And in 2 years, December of 2022, if I recall correctly, so right around there, it's going away entirely. End of support. You can continue to run it in your Horizon 7 environments, but it's officially done. VMware's transitioning for desktop monitoring to a partnership with a tool called Control Up. And for the infrastructure underneath, VMware has a to be announced sometime in Q3, so stay tuned. Sometime in Q3, they're going to tell you what replaces VROPS for Horizon for that underlying stuff. So that's a big one.
I'm gobsmacked on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just started to get interesting, and now it's so Fusion is no longer being paired or as part of the Horizon suite, which makes sense because Mirage has gone away. That Fusion Mirage pairing was what really made things work for checking out the desktop. With Mirage going away, there's no reason to be throwing you a whole bunch of licenses of Fusion. So I don't think anybody is shocked or will care that much about it. But that's licensing changes. Deprecated features. This is a big one. So I'm going to lead with the two that I'm so glad to see gone. Persona management and persistent disks. I've seen far too many customers cause themselves problems. I get asked about these things, and in general, my answer is, unless you're already using them, know exactly what you're doing, and you're okay with them, steer clear. And I have to explain this to far too many customers when we're installing the agent. They go, Persona management, that's that thing where I can get profile management, and they're running something like Standard Edition Horizon. And I go, no, you can't. You could have used that and had a bad time in Windows 7. Now you can use that in Windows 10 and have a horrible time. So you can't do that. And then they ask, why is it still there? And I go, sorry, it is.
as a layman, when you say persona management and persistent disks, that's, to me, that sounds like I've got this stuff on my desktop and I want these icons to be here when I log back into potentially a new machine. Is that
Correct.
appropriate? Is that
Correct.
exactly what that is? Okay.
Persona management is RTO profiles that VMware purchased. It is essentially roaming profiles. Roaming profiles with a little bit of optimization for VDI. And persistent disks are, we're going to take all of your user authored data, your entire profile, we're going to throw it on a drive that gets shimmed into the virtual machine on login.
So basically, instead of a network-based network-based profile, it is a persistent VMDK-based profile.
It gets mounted to
VMDK-based profile, yeah, which was better than persona management. I've seen more people have some success with that, but management gets to be a nightmare when you're wanting to rebuild machines and then reassign persistent disks, and it's just not something that scales well.
So this functionality
A lot of orphan disks out there.
Is the usability going to be the same? Is the user experience going to be the same?
Well, for the most part, I didn't have a lot of customers using this. If they were running standard licensing and they needed profile management, they needed a persona management, analogy. They were going somewhere else to get it. So this is well, let me get one more deprecated feature in there before we transition to the cool stuff that's changing with licensing that I think users are actually going to be really happy with. But first, a little bad news. Linked clones are being deprecated. A lot of us have used them for a long time. I've always stood on that soapbox and said, there's still a place for linked clones. There's still a place for linked clones. Now, I can't stand on that soapbox anymore if this instant clone smart provisioning is every bit as good as VMware says it is. But we've been on this merry-go-round before, and I'm still a little bit dizzy. So I'll believe it when I see how well it works. I really do hope. I genuinely hope. Because here's two things. And Matt, to follow up on your question about is the functionality still going to be there? VMware is coming out with a DEM standard version that's going to be included in the Horizon Standard Suite. So that is awesome because DEM has been a very successful tool for managing profiles on Windows 10. And now, I don't know exactly yet what the specific changes are. What can and can't you do? I'm going to guess they're going to rip out like Horizon Smart Policies or some of the really cool advanced stuff. But as long as they've still got the user customizations and like the user environment customizations still mostly intact, we're in a good place because that's 98%
Makes
of what
the cost of
people
entry
use.
to a VDI environment a lot easier to swallow or get started with.
It does because everybody needs, unless you're doing something real specific with only persistent desktops and you have a very understanding user base, kind of everybody needs some kind of profile management, and so this is getting worked into standard, which is fantastic. I mean, I have so many customers who upgraded to enterprise specifically for DEM and then said, hey, app volumes, that's great. Maybe we'll use that too. Instant clones, we'll check it out, see if we want to use that. But really the carrot that got them to enterprise was I need a really good profile manager that, I need it to work. And that's not persona management like what's included in standard. And so to see VMware identify persona management is lacking. Persistent disks don't solve the problem at scale. We're going to move DEM down in the licensing tier. Now, similarly, the same thing's happening to instant clones. Instant clones are available in standard, advanced, enterprise, subscription, persistent or perpetual licensing, all of that. Instant clones
that is nice,
but
board. Also necessary because if they're going to ditch link clones,
yes,
you better give me an alternative and not leave me out to dry in the standard tier.
I had to squeak that in quickly because there's probably like a whole bunch of nerds who are like rending garments and stuff. As I said, link clones are going away and they're on standard license. They're like, no, how could you do this?
Because I had to go look it up real quick. DEM is Dynamic Environment Manager. Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
And so that's a bit that's going to handle making sure that all of my user-facing stuff, because really with this desktop thing, you're working in that space where user experience is a big deal, right?
It's a huge deal, and DEM helps
the only
a lot
deal.
with that.
Yeah. Exactly.
That is your only real metric, and everything else we put around it, right? Control up, any other monitoring tools we put in there, anything we look at the environment. At the end of the day, if the user calls up and says my desktop is sluggish, that's when I get the call from the IT guy. And the red alert, the klaxons go off, the bat phone rings, and you go, okay, we've got to figure this out because you don't care that much. You're monitoring it, but at the end of the day, if the end user's happy, that's the ultimate and only metric that decides whether you've had a successful Horizon deployment.
Okay.
Man. Yeah, I beat that drum all the time. It's I know I've just said it even on this episode. Standing up a VDI environment, easy. running it, designing it, deploying it for your user base, whole different animal. That's why we're really appreciative of your knowledge and dedication, David, because I can imagine, listen, if it were me, hey, Matt Yeti, you're now running Ivoxy's VDI practice. My hands have been thrown up years ago on,
Nope.
You mean I have to interact with Windows 10 on a daily basis? String me up.
Yep.
And yeah. So for that reason alone, and I always knew you were a little off, and now, I know why a little bit more, but we appreciate you all the same for it, David.
Yep. I'm happy to take that bullet for you.
Hey, let me get my virtual desktop guy. Let me get my Horizon guy. That's way outside of my...
That's another button on my keyboard that should be a pre-built macro.
You're my VDI guy. Well, and
I got something to talk to you about that.
I'll get a keyboard button for let me get my container guy, and then we're even.
Done. I'll take that one for you.
There we go. There we go. Well, don't forget, we do have that vSphere 6-7 advanced class coming up, September 22nd to 24th with Shane. Use the link in the show notes to learn more, and don't forget to use the code DCT1000 to save $1,000 on that class. Slots are filling up actually really quickly, so you'll want to jump on that, and a great deal for our DCT listeners. So thank you all for supporting us, for giving us reviews on iTunes. I don't know, maybe you can squeeze a few more bucks out of them. I don't know. No promises. But review us on iTunes. Whatever Google's deprecating tomorrow, wherever they find podcasts there, and Stitcher and Overcast and Spotify. And datacentertherapy.com works as well if you go there. It's very cool. Do you guys have anything to add before we wrap today?
I guess the only thing I'm going to throw out there is Shane, who's running the vSphere class. Guy is awesome. We've been huge fans of him since even before he started at Ivoxy. So stoked to see him being the one to teach the class, and I think it's going to be great. Now, if I get the chance, hey, I'll be sitting in as well, because he's going to teach me something, because Shane is he's a rock star. So
we've always prided ourselves, and part of our brand is at Ivoxy is we're white glove. We want it to be. We walk in, we work with you, but it's very white glove touch. High class, high quality. Services, consulting, design, and work, and Shane exemplifies. If anybody does, Shane Bradley exemplifies that mood from Ivoxy Consulting. So I'm excited, along with you, David, that more of our customers are going to experience that touch from Shane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Cazzo, Mr. Crow. I'm sorry, Mr. Vacazolino. It's very good to see you as well.
And you too,
David,
Mr. Vayeti.
Yeah, well, that's backwards because I get called Mr. Yvette all the time. So
there you go.
Yeah,
Yvette. Yeah. Can you do both at the same time, 3 times fast?
Well, I've signed up for things in the mail or whatever where I fill my name out, like put letters with my hand on paper, that thing called writing, and then I'll get a call from whoever then dummied and put that into the system, and they call me Mr. Yvette. I'm like, how do even when I type it into a form and I put it in properly, how do you blow that, right? I don't know. It's fine. There's always a V in my name, apparently.
There's always
too.
something.
So,
well, about 60% of the time, there's an E in my name as well. So I feel your pain a little bit.
I'm going to try to stick with Vacazolino if I can. I'm going to beat that one in, and I don't think he minds either. So
no, that's one of the better ones, actually. I'll take that.
Well, for David Crow, for Matt Vacazolino, I'm Matt Yvette. Have a great day, everyone.